Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
Welcome, everyone. My name's Ian, as George said. I'm the CEO of Fox Cub. We're a 30-person studio. We're actually fully distributed as a team, so we're all over the world. And we started about 3 years ago and have been making slots games. We have Slots Vacation, which has been live for about 2 years. And over the course of that, we've grown, obviously, as a studio and learned a lot about what it's like to grow and be in the social casino space as a small team. So I'm here to share some of what we've learned, but also in the course of what we've been doing, I've been talking to a lot of other people who've been starting small studios in the social casino space, seeing how they've succeeded and grown and thrived. And there's a lot of different interesting approaches that different teams have taken. So I want to share some of their learnings and experiences too. Before I start, I'm interested in just hearing, like, how many of you guys run social casino studios or like are part of? Okay, cool. And how many of you guys have games that are live right now? Cool. And then who here is like a partner or would partner or provide services to or work with social casino companies? Cool. So yeah, we'll definitely have Q&A at the end. I'd love to hear some of your experiences too about what works and what doesn't. So before we start, I just want to lay some groundworks of what the space we're in looks like. I know a lot of you guys know this already, but it's good just to take a step back and see what space we're in. We know the space is super crowded. We know there are giant incumbents, and they have a lot of resources. Some of them have an extremely established set of players. They got into the space early and have been able to form dominant positions, and they have kind of extremely loyal players because they were able to get in early. Some of these players that we're competing against just have a ton of money, and they can spend basically arbitrary amounts of money on user acquisition. And then some of these players are able to partner with traditional land-based IPs and are able to have loyal players that recognize those IPs, come and play on the strength of those IPs. And these are some of the top players that we're competing against in our space, and they're really defining what the space looks like and a lot of the mechanics of what the user acquisition numbers look like and what players are expecting. So it's important to kind of understand what they're capable of. So given that, what are ways that we as a small studio, what are the options available to us? So two of the kind of standard answers in this is, when you have a space, you can either try to compete against the top players and kind of match them for features or find an innovative way to go surpass them, but really you need to have resources comparable and a product that's comparable to go compete against them. A different approach would be looking at the space and saying, okay, there's a lot of money here. We know there's a lot of money in social casino. We know it's possible to be successful, and there's actually a lot of people being successful. What are ways that I can be a partner to these, or I can provide access or provide leverage to them to be successful? So I think those are the two ways that I've seen a lot of people go in this space. So let's just see first, how strong exactly are the people that we're competing against? What exactly are their strengths? This is a graph of the monthly revenue of the top 7 slots games in terms of just grossing. So there's an outlier at the top, and it starts ramping down. But what's really important to see here is that we've got a cluster of games, each of which are doing around 5 million monthly revenue. So that translates to about 60 million a year in terms of top line, right? That means that they can easily fund a 100-person team and throw a couple of million a month into user acquisition, no problem. So that's really important in setting the scale of who it is that's defining the market and who we're competing against. The next thing here is this is a graph of ARPI, so average revenue per install. People also call it LTV, lifetime value. And each of those lines is a different game over the lifetime of the game from when they first launched to today. Today is where all the graphs end. So they're all normalized to the start of each game. Each tick is 1 month. So the shorter lines are games that released more recently. The longer lines are games that have been around for longer. The thing to see here is that, first of all of these top games have constantly increasing ARPI curves. Their ARPIs are growing over time, and most of them are growing fairly steadily. The second thing is that most of these games have an ARPI somewhere between $6 and $8. Right, it's fairly consistent. That ARPI, the fact that they cluster around $6 to $8, is exactly why the monthly revenues tend to cluster around the 5 million. That's pretty much the spot where the user acquisition market and the organic retention of the game ends up just like equaling out. The third thing to notice here is if you trace all of these lines back about 6 to 12 months from today, they all have an ARPI that's around $3 or $4. And that's also why, for those of us who've been following the user acquisition market, the casino cost of acquisition has been going up, is because these top players are able to set the market. They're able to drive the prices up to match what their own internal LTVs are able to get to, and that basically ripples down to the rest of us. Now, there are still ways for us to find user acquisition below the numbers that they're acquiring at, but it means that the bulk of the market and the price of the market is set. So that's kind of just an overview of what we're looking at. The numbers that we see for the ever-growing ARPI trends are driven by the quest for whales. It's pretty much across all of these games, a tiny fraction of the revenue is coming from the vast majority of the revenue is coming from a tiny fraction of the users. And those players are typically called whales in the vernacular. And the game is really, how do you find these whales, cultivate them, and get the most lifetime value out of them? This is a representative breakdown of revenue by lifetime value in terms of contribution. So the $10 tranche is people who have spent over their lifetime $10 or less, and the size of the pie is how much of the game's total revenue they contribute. And you can see here, so the 10 is $10 or less, $100 or less, $1,000 or less. You can see that over half the revenue is coming from players who spend in the 10,000, 100,000 plus categories. And this is not one of the most successful games. The more successful they get, the more skewed they get. And at the very top end, even more of the revenue comes from the top players. And it's a small portion of it, less than a fraction of 1%. So this is like, really, we need to be figuring out how do we get whales if we were going to compete in that space. So again, the things that have been shown to work and the things that the top casinos are doing: recognizable IP, so either movies, TV shows, or machines that have done well in land-based casinos. Tuning, world-class tuning that players recognize and want to play. So things that have the correct cycle of velocity and the correct volatility and the right ups and downs and do really good big wins, right? That's kind of just the game design. And then the third one is the personalized optimizations. So that's really, the first two, I think anyone in the space, we look at a game, we can see, okay, it's got to look good, it's got to play well. But the third one with the personalized optimization is the one that a small studio tends to miss. When you're doing competitive analysis, you can't see the optimizations. You can't see that they're changing the game behavior very significantly for the whales. They carefully shepherd the whales from, I see that this person is starting to buy, let's buy them more packs, let's get them loyal, let's get them more features, and they actually open up a whole new set of gameplay and a whole new set of purchase options for those whales. And so that third one is the one where, as a small developer, if you want to go down the route of competing with the top players, you have to understand how to do as well or better than the top games. So we talked about one way, is like what would it look like if we wanted to go after it. We're going to talk about some techniques for doing that later. But I want to talk about the second path first. So the second path is, if there's a gold rush and everyone's out digging for gold and there's a lot of gold to be found, maybe you don't need to go do the work of going and digging. Maybe you can just sell them shovels, right? So here's a set of games from a friend of mine's company. They're also small. They started around the same time we did. And they took the approach of creating an entire collection of slots games. They've been able to put them out at very high quality and very fast rate. And they've done a lot of work on App Store optimization. So these games are able to generate a lot of organic installs. And these are all slots games, and they've qualified all of these installs to be slots affinity or high slots affinity installs. So players who come and join the games are able to get cross-promoted into the other games at a very high efficiency. So they're able to command extremely high ad costs when they sell these users. And so instead of going and trying to go and get the $6 to $8 ARPIs on their own, they can basically sell these users to the higher cost casinos and let them go and try to monetize them for the full value. Something else that you guys might have noticed, there's these weird collection of games that don't seem like they do very well or are very fun on their own, but what they're actually doing is they're a very good filter. They filter users that have high affinity for slots, and CoinDozer is one of these games. Not all of these are by the same publisher, but the reason you see so many CoinDozer games is for this exact same reason. They're a good inbound filter for slots, and the cost of acquisition to do organic acquisition on a CoinDozer game is a small fraction of what it would take to get acquisition on a slots game. So you're able to play in the social casino space and take advantage of kind of all the value that's being created here without having to go and build that exact same stack of technology and tuning in order to compete at the top tier. So the three things that are really important in this version of what you're doing is when you're trying to sell installs and sell users to the top tier players is, one, you need to figure out how to do app store optimization so that you can really get organic installs for free. You need to do a good job of selecting which ad networks you're selling from, and you actually need a team that's figuring out where are the networks that are kind of paying the most, where can I be able to target my users most efficiently. What you're trying to do in this scenario is basically pre-filter for the best users, and then you want to get maximum value out of that. And the third one is actually really important, network retention. So when you're doing the standard slots for social casino play, what you're looking to do is have long-term LTV. You want to get the most dollars out of the users. And if you need to play an aggressive form where you are prompting people to buy a lot and making them, upsell them to bigger and bigger packages, you might lose some people, but it's okay as long as you're nurturing the whale along. If you're in this model where you're trying to sell ads, what you want to do is have lifetime retention, because you can sell the same users to lots of different companies and get monetized in all of them. And so you actually want a very different style of tuning the game. So we talked about what the two strategies might look like. One of the things of being small is that there are niches that you can fit into that other people can't do. There are ways for us to change the rules to make it a little bit easier to win. So the first big one is reducing cost. So at Fox Club, one of the things we've done is we've aggressively hired remotely, and this is part of the core cultures of the team. I did it personally for lifestyle reasons because I didn't want to go to an office, but we found that there's tremendous cost benefits. We're able to hire people who are extremely talented, extremely hardworking, but they live in places that are not San Francisco, they're not Boston, they're not Seattle. And we're able to get really talented people and retain them and make them really happy, but pay a fraction of what it costs to build a team in a tech hub. So these are just some resources that we found to be very useful in hiring remote workers. I just want to share a couple of tips for what we've learned in terms of, like, if you're trying to grow a remote team. One is that you need to define a completely different set of culture than what you're used to in a physical, in-person team. So there's a lot of challenges with working remotely, and if you define the culture properly, you can get through a lot of the, especially communication problems. The second thing is that you want experienced hires or people who are very, very quick to train. Training is just extremely hard in general, and when you don't have the face time, it becomes even harder. So we found that even though we're a small company, we're willing to pay a little bit of a premium for people who are going to be able to hit the ground running. And the third one is time zone. So you guys saw that we have people in just all over the world. That works really well for artists, but anyone that's touching the dev team, you really want them on a single time zone. The second thing is revenue opportunities. So there are ways that small companies are able to get, if you're a small team, you've got a dozen people, if you get $500,000, that's excellent. You can fund your team for a long time. For somebody that's like a Playtika or a Zynga, $500,000 is like, well, I don't know if we want to go and bend over and pick that money up, right? So one thing is, if you're thinking about where to start your company, if you go start it in Finland, you can get 100K, 250, and $500,000 for various milestones, and it's just free money. You just use it for your development costs and don't even have to pay it back. So you got to structure, if you're in a position where you can flexibly structure where you start your team, something like that could be really useful. Windows has been aggressively looking for developers to develop on their platform. If you're willing to build your game for Windows Phone first and release there, you can get a couple $100,000, $500,000, just for using them as a testing platform, so that you can get good app stability and build some relationships, and then you have a better polished product for iOS and Android when you do launch there. Those are just two examples that I've seen friends take advantage of, but those types of opportunities are out there for a small team if you're looking for ways to accelerate or bootstrap your growth. So those are kind of like if you're playing small ball, right? But what if you do want to go up against the big boys and actually play their game of building a really full-featured stack. Well, you're a small team. That's the whole premise of what we're talking about. But you want to be able to produce a product that monetizes and performs at a very high level. So the way to do that is to leverage work that other people have done. The first thing that's obvious and that's time-tested is find a publisher. So Foxcub, we've decided to partner with Scopely. Scopely is our publisher, and they provide a bunch of useful things that we actually really like. I'm going to speed up a little bit, and if we can cover some of this in questions later. So one thing that when you're looking for a publisher, you want them to do is user acquisition. When you're looking for a publisher for a good user acquisition, the key is not their network size. We just went over how in slots or in casino, the users need to get pre-filtered to have high affinity. Most publishers do not have a network of users that are good for casino games. Most of them have puzzle or bidcore. So when you're looking for a publisher, really look for someone who's willing to spend the 3 to 5 million per month range and has the relationship with your ad networks to find the best traffic and are able to therefore compete with the people that you're trying to buy ads against. The second one is market insights. There's a lot of information that I've shared today. Not all of those came from my network directly. Your publisher probably has a better business development network and can feed you good insights in a timely manner. One thing that you do not want to care about is tech. I will talk a little bit about other tech partners that might be useful for you to partner with, but your publisher is probably not one of those people. Game engine, I'll just say real quick, Unity has, the good thing is that everyone integrates against it. So when you choose an engine, if you can choose one that everyone has third-party integrations to, it makes your life a whole lot easier. The downside is performance, and you just really aren't ever ahead of the curve, right? If you have your own engine or you have something smaller, you can get ahead of people on performance or on adoption of new technologies. If you're on Unity or something standard, you get it at the same time everyone else does, and it's never a competitive advantage. So those are the trade-offs. Personalized tuning and personalized messaging. These two things are items that I mentioned as really important to getting whales. And if you guys want to be in the business of marketing to whales and retaining whales, you want to find a partner that has experience in this. And these are just some of the examples. There's a lot of vendors out there right now. The key when you're looking for this is you want to see proven performance. You want to see people who have already brought the whale retention and whale monetization to the level that you're trying to reach for, because you're trying to capitalize on all of their knowledge. Don't partner with someone who's trying to explore the space and learn the space at the same time you are. As a small company, it's easy to want to build solidarity with someone else who's going through the same thing as you. It's not worth it. And then some quick notes on successful partnerships. Having a clear view of cost is really important. It's not just the initial integration cost, it's the maintenance cost. A lot of these services require you to have someone on your team dedicated and committed to using their service. So knowing what your long-term cost in terms of maintaining that is really important. Keep your business terms simple. If you find yourself haggling over a lot of breakage clauses, it's probably not a partner you want to work with. Align goals. If you are trying to do something and you have a buddy you've wanted to work with for a really long time and you guys are trying real hard to figure out how your two products work together, it's probably best to find someone else who's exactly aligned with what you want to do. I've tried doing this a couple of times and it's been just a big waste of time. And then you end up spending more time preserving that relationship because don't explore. This kind of goes back to find an experienced partner. So you don't want to be in the wilderness with someone else who doesn't have a map. You want them to have laid down a clear path, proven to you that they've gone down this path before, and find the fastest way through it. And then finally, it's stay focused. So as a small team, it's like I've mentioned a lot of different kind of like niche ways to take advantage of the ecosystem or get funding or get revenue. Don't do all of them, right? Like pick a few, research them, and like stay focused. As a small team, you have to do that. And the last thing is don't do IP yourself. So we've tried doing IP. We spent a long time talking to a Hollywood personality, and I heard yeses from him and his whole entourage. And everyone was like, we want to do this deal. And a year later, still no deal, no paperwork. And those people are really there to protect that celebrity from your money and from protecting their money from you. So this is one area where our publisher, Scopely, has been excellent and has been really good in finding partnership opportunities. So if this is one of the most compelling reasons for doing a publisher partnership. Unless you have a member of your team with personal hands-on IP experience, it's probably something to avoid. So I think I need to wrap up. Again, my name is Ian. I'm happy to answer questions and chat afterwards.